when you're used to hearing like 2, 3, maybe 4%, like, and then someone comes at you with 10 to 14, it does sound a bit too good to be true. But yeah, and it's not without risk, like anything, I suppose. When I've been doing rooming houses since I was 16, so we did our first sort of conversions when I was 16. I'm 31 at the moment, so it's nearly half my life is in rooming houses. So from my perspective, I see it as very low risk because it's just all I know. Like rooming houses, they work, but only if they're executed properly.
Thanks for coming on, Stuart. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So if I gave you 60 seconds to introduce yourself, all right, tell us what you do and the number one problem that you solve.
I'm Stuart Baker, and together with my father, Mark Baker, we run Super Cashflow Developments and Rooming House Expert. We help investors create high-yield rooming houses, either through converting existing houses into rooming houses or building brand new rooming houses to achieve anywhere from 10 to 14% yields for our clients. So the main problem that we're helping investors solve is they're tired of their slow, underperforming properties or negatively geared properties. We help them unlock genuine positive cash flow.
Awesome. For those investors or people listening that have no idea, what a rooming house is, could you explain to us what a rooming house?
Yeah. So rooming houses are basically when you've got the one property and you're letting out multiple rooms is the basic, high level view of it. There's a lot of legislation around it. There's building code requirements, planning scheme requirements, health and safety requirements, minimum tenancy, consumer affairs. There's a lot of different legislation, but the simple explanation is just renting out separate rooms in one house. The rooming house can mean a lot of different things. You've seen some of our new builds where they're each basically a self-contained studio with their own kitchenettes and en-suites, or it can just be a bedroom.
So you mentioned that you started from age 16.
Yep.
That's really young. Like, could you tell us, or could you share, how did you get into rooming houses at such a young age as well?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of an emotional story, I guess. But when I was 16 in high school, my mum had breast cancer. My dad also broken his leg, so they're both bedridden basically. Dad could still sit in bed, and he had existing investment properties. Had to sell other businesses that he had because he couldn't run them from bed. He's a very detailed person. He was back then. If you googled rooming house, nothing would come up. It wasn't even a term in the planning scheme like it is now. But he was able to link together. Okay, here's what the building code says. Here's what the planning scheme says. And he sort of figured out, well, with these existing properties that we've got, we can really, as a way to make ends meet, we can get more money out of them. And so, our first ever conversion was a property in Rosebud.
Yep.
An existing property is actually one that I lived in for a couple of years, from 4 to 7 years old. So we converted that into, I think it was 7 rooms from memory. Dad's on crutches, doing what he can. Mum was painting as part of her sort of physiotherapy for after surgery. I was doing everything else because I was the young one and the most able. So it was all very hands-on. That was obviously how we got started, and the way we've done that conversion is very different to what we'll do now, based on what we've learnt. But that was really where things got started.
What was the rent back then compared to now?
I wouldn't know what the rent for the house was, but the rents per room back then were $180.
Wow.
I think the same properties now probably getting to $50 for the same rooms, maybe even more.
So roughly 15 years ago, thereabouts.
Yeah, give or take. So the rents definitely have gone up. They might have even been less than 180. They might have been 150. Now I'm thinking about it. So rents were a lot lower, but then that sort of snowballed from there. So once we did a few of those conversions, and obviously once Dad got a bit more able, and my mum as well, I was sort of looking at buying things to convert. So we started off, we did a lot of conversions for it was probably like 4 years. It was more conversion focused, and then we started doing some developments, 2014 to sort of 2017. And once we sort of figured out the system for the development side of things, we went a bit more public with it. So Super Cashflow Developments, I think we started that 2019 for the builds.
Yep.
But there's a lot of conversions involved, and other clients, and more conversion focused before that.
Wow. So you started that just before COVID, and then COVID.
For the development side of things. Yeah, that was fun.
How did COVID impact your business or the development side?
Look, there's a lot of fear in the market.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fear about a lot of things, I think, but in property investing, like everything just went down in value. No one wanted to buy anything. So I'd say for majority of 2020, there wasn't much activity. At the end of the year, I think we picked up a lot more business. Things just got a bit more, everyone got a bit more used to it, I think. But then the next year, 2021, as you know, in Victoria, there's still a lot of restrictions.
Yep.
And that meant restrictions on site with trades. So it's like 5 people allowed on site per day or something like that.
Yeah.
Postcode restrictions as well, from like metro to regional. We had a lot of regional jobs, and there was some, but it wasn't as bad. We got lucky, I think, in a lot of ways with how the restrictions worked for us. But yeah, it wasn't as bad as other stories that we've heard. But yeah, it still wasn't ideal.
Yeah. But obviously, you guys, coming out of COVID, you guys have been doing so many projects. Like my company is very thankful to be working with you guys. And to be able to see the rooming houses thrive and do so well, like to us, it's just a no-brainer why investors want to really maximize the cash flow in rooming houses. So awesome.
Yeah.
For those investors who are thinking of getting to rooming houses, right? They have their own portfolio. Usually, I've heard that most investors, they get like roughly 2-3% yield, right?
Yep.
So you mentioning that you're being able to get 10 to 14 gross yield. Like, could you explain how that is possible?
Well, look, I did prepare some just back of the envelope examples. One for a conversion, one for a new build.
Yeah.
So for the conversion, I've just sort of assumed a property of about 850k, which is maybe on the higher side of Metro Victoria anyway. Once you've got your stamp duty, your permits, your furniture installation, all the works on site, you're probably all in at about $1 million for the total project. If you convert that into 9 rooms, let's just say there's a master bedroom, that might get 300 a week. It might even get more, but I'm just being conservative here. The 8 other rooms might be about 250 a week, which is roughly 2,300 per week, which is about 120k per year. So if you sort of back of the envelope numbers, you've got $1 million in, 120k cash flow. That's about 12%.
Wow.
And then even your net after all those, before interest, so you've got your cleaning, your utilities, your rates, your insurance, even then you're probably sitting at about 9-10% as your net yield.
Yep. And just to clarify, so you said just now it's like $1 million to get started. Was that including the land as well, or that's excluding the land?
So that's just for a conversion. I did prepare something for the new builds as well. Where that would be a higher total spend because you've got land. I've assumed 550 for land. Even that might even be sort of out of Metro nowadays. I've gone 785k for the build. So all up, that's about 1.4, maybe 1.5 total. Your rents will be a lot higher. You're probably looking at 150 to 180k as your gross rent, but a lot higher barrier of entry.
So obviously you've talked about conversions versus new builds. Gross yields were roughly how much for each?
Look, it depends on the area, obviously. Like if you're going more regional, you've got less capital cost in the land. Your rents don't go down at the same percentage as your land value does, so you can get better yields. So it just depends. We've done one that's in Preston recently, a very high-end build, and that's 9% gross, but that's that was 1.6, 1.7 total spend. We've done conversions that have been in the 20% in terms of like gross yield, just because they've purchased at a good price. So
obviously this is within Victoria as well, right?
Yeah,
like
only Victoria. I'm assuming Metro. We do a lot of regional stuff as well, but I've just based a lot of the stuff in this discussion on Metro Victoria.
And when I've been networking and I share some of the figures that you've mentioned, right? A lot of the investors or people in the industry, they're very skeptical. So they actually go like, are those numbers real? And when I try to break it down, even just using conservative numbers and explain like why, they don't even some to find it hard to believe. So is there a catch, or like what are the risks involved with rooming houses?
When you're used to hearing like 2, 3, maybe 4%, and then someone comes at you with 10 to 14, it does sound a bit too good to be true. But and it's not without risk, like anything, I suppose. When I've been doing rooming houses since I was 16, so we did our first sort of conversions when I was 16. I'm 31 at the moment, so it's nearly half my life is in rooming houses. So from my perspective, I see it as very low risk because it's just all I know. But from what I've sort of seen in the industry, it's not really. Like rooming houses, they work, but only if they're executed properly. So the risk is just not executing your rooming house properly.
So what does it take to have a rooming house to be, executed properly? What does that involve?
The biggest things come down to designing it properly for the area, your target market, the right specifications. There's a lot of, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of legislation like building, planning. You have to meet all those requirements, or there's potential risk of jail time in Victoria for doing things wrong.
Okay.
And the biggest thing is one of the biggest things is the management or the operations after you've built it. Mm-hmm. If they've got it, that's where you make your money. That's where your cash flow comes in. So you need to have the right team that has the right experience at running rooming houses. That's a lot. There's a lot of those risks there.
And what are the things that investors need to know that really helps keep the rooming houses at a high grossing rental income?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of things where I feel like a lot of people might sometimes they'll focus more on size. They'll maximise their size, but they'll under-spec it. They've spent too much on the size, so they've got to save money on specifications. And some simple things would be like soundproofing. If you've got poor soundproofing, you're going to get high turnover. It's as simple as that. So I think speccing it properly is very important. Also furnishing, I'd say that's a very important part too, where some people are, I don't know why, they've spent so much on a build and then they're haggling over 10 grand worth of, that might be a 40k quote, they want to get to 30.
Yep.
And then you get low quality furniture, the bed's not comfortable, people don't want to live there. So I think just spending on things that make it a comfortable space and that make people want to stay for longer, because then you've got better occupancy rates and that's how you make your cash flow.
And you mentioning about furnishing, like what's the difference between a poorly furnished rooming house versus a well furnished or professionally furnished rooming house? Yeah,
that's a good question. It's probably hard to quantify. I can use some real examples at the moment. So we've got a few that are being built at the same time. One of them's actually a bit smaller. The other one's a bit bigger. The specs are pretty much the same. One of them spent quite a bit on furniture. The other one went very cheap on furniture. The smaller one has filled quicker, and they're getting the same rents, but the other one's not full yet. The smaller one's full, so it's getting the full rents. It's like 310 times 9, maybe a bit more per week. The other one's only, currently would be only be making not even 700 a week. The other one's making 2.5, give or take. So but it's filled a lot quicker. So you're not, and that's one thing. Obviously, turnover is another part of it. So if you're able to maintain, say, a 92% occupancy rate, and the other one's only able to maintain even 85, it's a massive difference in your cash flow every year. So I think the furniture probably doesn't necessarily change your rents, but it changes your occupancy rates massively.
The well finished would have better occupancy rates, less turnover as well. And happier tenants, right?
100%. Yep.
Awesome. And then that obviously translates to better cash flow for the investors as well.
Yeah, definitely. Better cash flow, less headaches with management. So that's ultimately what you want to achieve, I think.
And where do you see the rooming house industry heading in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I've been doing this for a long time, and there's the whole time I've been in this industry, there's been high demand for this type of accommodation. It's a singles-focused product. Predominantly, it's a singles-focused product. There's an increase of singles in general. People are getting married later. Divorce rates are increasing. So there's an increase of singles, but there's not necessarily a massive increase in singles-focused housing. So I can't see, like you're talking 5 years, the demand's still going to be there. There's always a demand for singles-focused housing. I think I'm seeing in recent years more people are getting more educated, so I think the quality of the industry in general is improving. I think it would probably just keep trending that way.
And one of the common questions that a lot of people ask me in the industry about rooming houses is that the general perception of a rooming house tenant or tenants that are looking to rent a rooming house that you probably get asked a lot. Like from 10 plus years ago, where they think it's like almost like any dodgy tenant that would be renting a government housing property, right? So how is that the same, or has that changed, and what kind of tenants are renting rooming houses now?
Look, that market definitely does exist. There's a lot of, when we were first starting, a lot of the conversions that we were doing were in lower socio regional areas, targeting that market because it's a big market. If you're doing a brand new build where each room's basically a studio, Even if it's in one of those lower socio suburbs, you can still be picky with who you put in. I mean, it's just single people at the end of the day. But we've had IT workers, hospital workers, students, all sorts of different industries. That's just single people. From their perspective, they might see, okay, there's a studio for rent. Just say it's $300 a week, but there's no bills to pay. They can move in, or they don't need much stuff. It's fully furnished. They might have a courtyard, but they don't need to mow the lawn. So we've even had doctors and people in that sort of industry. They might be working at a local hospital, and it's just somewhere they can work long hours. They've got somewhere where they can sleep and eat, and that's all they need. So there's a big range of people that would live in a rooming house.
Yep. And do you see that there's still going to be a demand for rooming houses in the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. It's just like I said, singles are increasing when rent's increasing.
Yeah.
So people are if you're younger, just moving out of home, and you need somewhere affordable, that's really one of the only options.
And are there any specific suburbs that are hotspots now, or are in need or demand for rooming houses?
I get asked that a lot, and my answer is pretty much everywhere there's demand. We've done stuff all around Victoria. We've done a lot of regional suburbs, a lot of metro suburbs. We've never had issues with filling. We've never had issues with demand. I can't think of any particular hotspot. There's maybe a few areas that I think there's more rooming houses or high concentration that you must steer away from, but there's no real hotspot.
And for an investor thinking of investing in a rooming house, what kind of financial understanding or prerequisite would they need to get started?
If they've got some understanding of investing in general, so they understand what cash flow means and how to get a loan, and that's really all you'd need. When we handle a lot of the plans and permits and all that more high level stuff, but as long as they've got an understanding and they understand how to read feasibilities and things like that, it's not really that high a level understanding from an investment perspective, but obviously if you're doing the development, that's a different story.
Yep. And what would you say would be the top 3 experts that they need to talk to make sure that their rooming house is going to be high performing and producing high cash flow?
Finance would be a big one. It's probably more than 3 that I can list, but I'd say finance would be a big one, because if you can get a good rate or a good LVR, that can make a massive difference to your income. Potentially a buyer's agent for targeting specific areas for other reasons. Like I said, anywhere might work for cash flow, but if you're trying to balance that cash flow and growth, there might be certain regions that are better for that. But like we mentioned earlier, property manager or management team, that's where you make your money. So you really want to make sure you've got someone that knows what they're doing.
Yep.
I'd probably say they should talk to us for doing the development plans and permits and things like that. It's just someone that's got the actual experience and track record in this industry.
So how many rooming houses have you guys developed so far?
We haven't been really good at keeping track. It's been over a long period. In terms of actual builds, it's probably 50 or 60, I'd say, around that sort of number. But in terms of total projects, including the conversions, it'd be in the hundreds.
Yep.
We haven't really tallied it up, the exact number, but it'd be well in the hundreds.
Yeah. I don't know how your team does it. You guys are doing very well. So really good job to you guys. Yeah, would you say rooming house investing is more suitable for sophisticated or experienced investors rather than your retail mom and dad investors?
Yeah, look, I'd say it really depends. Just based on our data and the top investors that we've had. So we've had, I'd say a lot of the new builds, they've been generally more of your sophisticated, experienced investors or even developers themselves. So, they have a better understanding of what's involved. They're not as scared or not as risk averse as mum and dad investors may be. So for the new builds, it's been mostly more sophisticated investors. For the conversions, we've definitely had a higher percentage of mum and dad investors. In a lot of cases, they've already got a property or maybe 2 properties that they've invested in, but then with the rising interest rates, other costs increasing, and even though the rents have increased, they haven't increased at the same amount. So their portfolios are getting more and more negative. So in a lot of cases, they're just looking at trying to increase the rents of already existing properties.
So you're saying that for new builds tend to be more for experienced or sophisticated investors, and the conversions are a good place to start from for mum and dad retail investors.
Especially if they've already got a property because they've already got it. We can convert it. But even if it's just for their first investment, it's a lower barrier of entry to do a conversion than a new build, and a lot quicker. So you're not as nervous waiting for the build to finish and all these holding costs along the way. It's a much faster process.
Yep. What's like a minimum number of bedrooms or type of property that a mum and dad investor could potentially explore and reach out to you and say, hey, would this property be suitable? What do those properties look like?
We've done new builds that have been only 3 bedrooms. So it'd be up to sort of their strategy and their comfort levels and their target rents and things like that. But I'd say a lot of the conversions that we're doing, they're probably 6 to 7 rooms in most cases.
Yep.
The maximum you can get to is 9 rooms.
Yep.
So anywhere between 3 to 9 is achievable.
How would an investor get started if they were interested in rooming houses?
Look, they could reach out to us, the team. So there's Super Cashflow Developments or Rooming House Expert if they're wanting to sort of understand more. But I'd just be sort of talking to the right people, asking the right questions, and just understanding what they're wanting to achieve. If it's maximising their returns, or they're wanting to be able to invest in somewhere that's higher growth, they might not have as good a yield, but it means that they can afford to hold in that suburb while the growth's coming through. So I guess it'd be just worth understanding what their strategy is.
It's the biggest benefit for an investor to, invest in a rooming house versus your traditional, long-term rental types of properties.
Yeah, look, I mean, the one big thing that I focus on is the cash flow. Like, obviously, if you've got this is an example. It's actually one that your team furnished in Warragul. That property was getting $490, I think, a week in rent, and it's now getting $2,400 and something. So it's nearly 5 times a rental, uplift. So to me, that's a big benefit. But another awesome benefit, and especially in Victoria, is the land tax exemption that's available for rooming houses. So if you've got a rooming house, you can be exempt from land tax, and that can save you a lot of money because Victoria's land tax is quite high.
So you're saying when you say exempt from land tax, that means if you have a rooming house in Victoria, you don't have to pay any land tax?
Yeah, zero land tax.
Yeah. Is that only to Victoria, or is it else? Like, how about the other states as well?
Only Victoria.
Only Victoria?
Yeah, only Victoria's got the land tax exemption.
Wow. No wonder a lot of investors are investing in rooming houses.
That's actually it's a good point. There's been a lot of mum dad investors that have also converted for that reason, and they might have had it just say a 4-bedder. They might have converted to a 6-bedder.
Yeah.
Minimal changes internally, so it might just be the lounge room, you close that off. There might be another study room, close that off. There's 2 extra rooms, but they're also looking at they're saving $5K or something per annum in land tax.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's massive saving, and I can see why a lot of investors want to get into that.
And people don't really love paying tax in general. I don't think.
Yes.
So if you can minimise it, why not?
Well, for those listening, yes, we've worked with my company, Morgan Series. Have worked with Stuart, Super Cashflow Developments, both on new builds and conversions as well. We've had the privilege to help furnish a lot of these properties, and so we're really thankful to be working with them, to be able to see them perform so well. The 490 is a recent project, so that's new to me. So I was shocked. Usually we get, we hear from you, it's like 350 per week. So to get 490, that's.
Oh no, sorry, it was 490 for the house previously. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
But 2,460.
All right. Okay, so 490. To 2,000. Okay, cool.
So
awesome.
5 times rental increase approximately.
I mean, and that's a no-brainer. No wonder you're able to get 10 to 14% gross yield. So for people who have yet to invest in a rooming house or are new to rooming house, right?
Yep.
What do the rooms look like? From a floor plan, from a layout, from a design perspective, from amenities. Can you explain what that looks like? Yeah,
I mean, so a lot of the stuff that we've been doing over since we've been doing the development specifically, we've been really trying to target that higher end market. So we're going more individual studios. So each room's got its own ensuite, kitchenette, private courtyards. We do things like high ceilings, air cons to every room, high level soundproofing between rooms. All those sorts of things. There's a mandatory requirement for a shared kitchen and shared living, shared laundry. So that's a mandatory requirement under the planning scheme. So that's provided as well. But there's a lot of things that we're focusing on, I suppose, and there's a lot of changes that we're making moving forward around optimising the design. So I guess minimise cost, maximise speed as a big thing because your holding costs can be quite high. If your rents are as high as we've discussed, that works out to about $12K a month in rent. So if we can shave off, 3, 4, 5 months, that adds up quite quick. So we're sort of working on a standardised model at the moment where it's going to be essentially 9 different versions of the same design, just with like 3 different spec levels, 3 different size levels.
Yep.
Because the main thing that we touched on earlier is size isn't necessarily the most important factor. It's your specs. And I'd say the furniture is pretty important as well. So it's about still having a model where you can maximise your rent, maximise tenant comfort, but not over-capitalise in the meantime.
Really curious because recently I've got a lead for my company for Rooming House.
Okay.
And we started to see that it's a very interesting layout of a studio where the bedroom, there is still a kind of like it's almost like a mini 1-bedroom apartment.
Okay, yep.
There's a separation between the bedroom area and the living/dining area. Is that required, and what's the difference, and how does that impact on the cash flow as well?
How many rooms is that design?
That was 9.
That was 9. There you go.
Yeah, it's pretty big as well.
I haven't really been a fan of doing it with the 9-bedders just because I feel like you've got 2 small areas instead of 1 larger area, but that's just my personal opinion. We are doing a project at the moment where it's going to be 7 rooms and quite big. Each room's going to have it's going to be a similar sort of thing. So there's a living sort of area and a bedroom area, but because it's 7 rooms, it's a bit bigger footprint for each room. So I think it doesn't feel as cramped. But that is definitely something that we're seeing come onto the market a bit more. People are doing less rooms and making each room a bit more comfortable. And I think a lot of it's come from in Brisbane. You can do rooming houses there too. We can do up to 9 rooms here. In Brisbane, they can do 5 rooms. So they're usually going 5 massive rooms. So I think that sort of design trend's starting here. But we're still mainly focusing on the 9 rooms because if you've got 9 incomes versus 7 incomes, you're typically getting much better returns.
But for the bigger rooms, do those bigger rooms can they actually charge more per room compared to the studios, the small studios?
Yeah, 100%. You can charge more. It depends on the area and things like that, but definitely you can charge more, and you'll probably get better occupancy rates as well. I'd say like your yield won't be as good, typically speaking. Again, for some investors are not as yield focused. They're happy to have something that's going to be, from their perspective, lower risk. People are going to be staying there for longer. So, and it's still very good returns, better than a standard investment. It's all a balancing act.
Do you know roughly on top of your head, like what's the percentage, in terms of for the bigger size rooms versus small size rooms? Like, is there a big difference? Like, what's that look like?
If I go regional numbers, just because they're top of mind, you might be sort of 300, 310 for a small, just a studio. If you went that 7-bedder model there, you might get 350 or so.
Okay.
You do have the potential, because it's larger rooms, you could put couples in. So you can have up to 12 people per room. 12 people, per rooming house. So you could have more couples, and then charge a bit more for couples. So you could push it to the high threes. That being said, on the land tax exemption, there is a maximum amount of rent that you can charge, which at the moment is $400 something cents, I think. That does go up every year, but that'd be a maximum rent that you could charge anywhere in Victoria.
Anywhere in Victoria,
if you want to meet the exemption,
to not be charged land tax.
Yep.
So what happens if you are charging more than $420?
Well, then you got to pay land tax.
Oh, okay. So that's okay.
So it's, balancing act. Yeah.
Interesting. So it sounds like it's roughly about anywhere between 10 to 20% difference, depending obviously on the layout, the size, and a lot of variables.
A lot of variables, but it could be around that. But then you got to remember you're losing. In this case, you're losing 2 rooms. But look, I'm definitely not against it. I'd like to see these sorts of designs, and they do look really nice, and it does mean that you can cater for different markets with all these different designs. So
maybe if those bigger rooms could maybe charge more. Obviously, it is a balancing act, but that obviously comes down to also the risk appetite of the investor as well, their own cash flow, their own ability to finance the project as well. So I mean, that's new to me. I didn't know there was a cap as well. So
right. There you go.
Where should people go if they want to know more about you or even potentially work with you as well.
We've got the website, supercashflow.com.au. We're on Facebook as well, so there's the Super Cashflow developments on Facebook. For the conversion side of the business, that's Rooming House Expert. So the website is roominghouse.expert. We're on Facebook as well, Rooming House Expert. We've got YouTube channels for both companies as well, where there's a lot of content, a lot of information, a lot of fly-through videos and things like that. And Instagram as well.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put the links, all the links in the comments. And then, whoever's listening, they can go and check it out. Since this podcast is called Cashflow Curiosity, if you're a listener and you're watching this episode, you'll let us know what you're curious about. Anything to do with cash flow. I'm genuinely learning, as you can tell, some of the things I'm learning firsthand as well from Stuart. Even though I've been working for him for 3 years now, there's still a lot of new things that I'm still learning. And so I'm very excited to be able to have this opportunity to interview him and all my future guest speakers as well. So if you're curious about cash flow, definitely give us a call, contact us in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Keith.
Awesome.